big hand.
Hello, can you hear me? All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Bryntse. I'm going to talk to you about my favorite JavaScript framework today. Walk through some topics that I think are really important if you want to get into building rich applications with this framework. So I'm just going to briefly introduce myself, share my background a little bit, talk to you what XJS really is and what it can offer you in your environment. Open up the XJS box and look at the class system that's made by Sencha. Look at how you deal with data. That's a very nice, powerful feature that they provide. We're also going to take a look at the widgets that are in the box and also the component model. And at the end, if there's time, I'm going to do some live hacking, sacrifice to the demo gods, and see if that gets me anywhere. So we'll see if we get there. So first of all, I come from Helsingborg. I'm roughly 36 years old. I come from a software background for about 10 years. I've been doing C# and embedded C databases. As part of a customer assignment for one of the mobile vendors, Sony Ericsson, we stumbled upon XJS when we had to build a test data gathering platform for an internal network they have. And they asked us if we could build something for them that it had to be web-based. They don't want to send Excel sheets around or keep papers flying around in the office. It had to be web-based, no Flash. So they basically said, yeah, choose whatever you want that works, and that helps us be productive. So we looked at the jQuery and Dojo, Yahoo, a couple of other of those tools that were around. So back in 2007, there wasn't as much as it is today. So that's how I stumbled upon it. And a few years later, I realized I need more than 8 hours of JavaScript per day to be happy. And the job couldn't really offer me that, so I realized I had to start my own company. And that led to Bryntum, and that's 3 years ago now. And now I can do XJS 20 hours a day if I want to, and that sometimes happens. So we make JavaScript components, scheduling charts, Gantt charts, and also testing tools for JavaScript. And if you want to follow us on Twitter, there's a Bryntum account you can follow. So who in here has heard of XJS before? Using it? All right, not so many. All right. So it's a client-side JavaScript framework for building rich internet apps. And just a quick background, it started out as a UI or YUI extension back in 2006. Now UI is one of the first players in the major JavaScript frameworks. So in 2007 they were version 1.0. Today they're at 4.2. So it's been a few generations. The company is now called Sencha. They're out of Silicon Valley, 100 or so employees doing only JavaScript and consulting. And they're funded by the same company that funded Google, Yahoo, PayPal, etc. They have a really nice community forum as well, over 400,000 users. Some of the features that we get is a full UI application development suite. It's not really a small library like, I don't know, jQuery or micro libraries that we also see frequently today. It's actually everything. It's a big toolkit. It has so many widgets, and that's part of its popularity, I think. You have all the grids, forms, trees, charts, etc., etc. Also a very powerful data package, which allows you to deal with data in an isolated manner. Also a powerful class system. They have an MVC pattern invented, and a WYSIWYG designer for those of you starting out. You can just drag drop to the screen and design if you want to do that. And I'm not sure this is a positive thing, but I still call it a little bit of a Windows, I don't know, Windows 7, Windows Vista look-alike. So judge it if you want. And there's a really nice layout engine inside of the package as well. I'll show you this in a bit. So I'm obviously kind of biased since my business runs upon XJS, and I really like the framework, but it's definitely not a single solution to every problem for the everyday web developer. So when you want to use XJS is really when you want to build something complex, something that is an application, not a website. Typically, these applications are line of business apps that sits behind some firewall on the internet, maybe government application, military, schools, or things that you don't really see on Google. You can't Google your way and find XJS apps very easily, and that's pretty much the reason why not so many know about it. And for us, in my gig at Sony Ericsson, this was the case. We had a really data-intensive situation. We're going to show a lot of data. We have to group it, filter it, arrange it in trees. That's a really good fit for Ext. And then you also have to flip the coin and think about when should I not use Ext. So sites like bbc.com or Google, H&M, I would be extremely surprised and disappointed if I saw those sites powered by Ext. That would be hilarious. So that's really not the case for Ext. It's too big and it doesn't add anything to the mix. If you're targeting mobile or devices with limited memory or on a really slow connection, you probably shouldn't use Ext either. You should go with maybe jQuery Mobile or some micro framework, maybe Sencha Touch if you're building something app-like. If you care about SEO, which is critical for some websites, of course, since with XJS and these powerful other libraries, you generate the entire DOM on the client, so the Google spiders will be slightly confused. And of course, if initial page load time is critical, if you're building Amazon.com, you would be fired on the first day if you suggested, yeah, let's use Ext. So something to think about. It's not always the best tool for the job. And let's also give some context about what's tricky with web development and building complex JavaScript apps from my viewpoint. Typically, if you don't use some type of framework, you spend a lot of time inventing all the UI paradigms and patterns yourself. You have to build a layout engine, and you have to learn all the complex CSS and stuff that you really don't want to care about if you want to solve a problem for somebody else. Browsers has quirks, we all know that. We know about IE6, we know about IE7 quirks mode. IE10 has 2 quirks modes, I believe. That's nice. All these browser dissimilarities introduce hacks. We need hacks to work around those. All the hacks just add uncertainty to the code. Somebody comes in new to the team, how are they supposed to know which hack is doing what? Because maybe we're not so good at commenting all the hacks after all. Well, I'm not. When you have multiple authors of UI code, it's very easy to end up in a spaghetti code situation where each developer has its own standards and ideas of, yeah, the save button should be green with a nice gradient, and someone else should maybe say, yeah, it should have border radius 10 pixel or something like that. So getting it consistent is not easy if you have a 10 people team with creative minds, so to speak. And function spaghetti, that's bound to happen if you don't have strong patterns underlining your direction, what you want. And who in here tests their UI code in their web frameworks or web applications? How many? Yeah, so this is kind of this is hard to get in to your daily life, to make room for testing. It's kind of hard because there's so many requirements and the customer maybe doesn't really understand or appreciate the value of testing. So this guy kind of gets it, he nails it, that yeah, we test in production, the customer is the test suite. So some pros of using XJS is that you get, of course, cross-browser support, as you would if you got downloaded jQuery or UE or any other tool, which takes away a lot of the pain with stuff like IE6 or 7. You get a very simple config-driven API, standardized. You write business logic more than you write HTML. So you kind of forget about what it's like to write HTML because you have all these rich toolboxes to put on the page. And you don't need to be a wizard in CSS, as I wasn't when I started, and I'm still not. I wish I was. Some cons, of course. There's a learning curve. The API is kind of big, So you have to spend quite a bit of time learning the API, which I think scares a lot of people, because it's not something with a 2-page API. There's a huge, huge API. And if you go with the Ext way, so to speak, you pretty much put your eggs in one basket, because it's basically one tool for all your needs. You don't combine it normally with jQuery, because Ext is a superset of jQuery, so to speak. It does all that and some more. And it's kind of it's a big download as well. The minified version is 1.3 megabyte, which is kind of big. So it doesn't fit all cases. Can also be tricky to theme sometimes. And you cannot hate JavaScript. That's a big no. I don't know, who here hates JavaScript? All right, we're in the right room. That's good. So let's just see what a hello world example looks like. So instead of firing up my IDE, I'm just loading some page that uses Ext. That's the easiest way to get a sandbox. So I can just type whatever I want in the console here and access the API directly. And I type a one-liner that gives me an alert like this. Very, very simple. So if we review that, what I just did, so Ext is very much about object-oriented JavaScript. You have all these namespaces and classes that you can interact with out of the box. And to get started, you only really need basic HTML and CSS knowledge and JavaScript knowledge. And what I just did generated a one-liner with a cross-browser alert window, which wasn't just a single element, and it's not a blocking alert. It's just trying to fool you to think it's a blocking alert. And we didn't really spend any time thinking about the layout or styling or stuff like that. And when you write applications like this, your HTML page is normally empty by default. And it's a single page, so you don't really change the page state to new addresses and so on. So a high-level look at XJS 4 gives us the widgets, data package, a class system with a component model, and layouts. So we're going to try to run through those sections briefly. So if you open up the source folders of XJS and the examples, you'll see there's a plenty of widgets around. I think there's about 80 examples at least. So you can learn quite quickly by just browsing in the API examples. And if you want to try it yourself right now, you can just browse to sencha.com/xjs/examples. And all the widgets share a uniform API, which makes it kind of nice, because once you learn one, you kind of understand how the rest of them work. And they're all documented in the same way. And if you want to change some widget, you can subclass it and override it, or make any changes you want. And everything is extensible. So first of all, I think we should look at the grid panel, because that's kind of a critical feature for most applications that deal with data. If you don't use a table, that's going to be an odd case. So something I read on Twitter or Reddit that I thought was funny. This kind of sums up my view on the XJS grid panel. So I think he likes Ext even more than I do. But it's really, really powerful. It's almost like a mini Excel. So it's a tabular component, obviously, and the people I talk to tend to mention that this is the #1 reason they choose Ext in the first place. And out of the box, you get sorting, column resizing, column drag drop, row drag drop, inline editing, and so on. And since this is a very popular component in the community, a lot of people have written extensions and add-ons to this grid. And once you have the grid running, of course, you want the master detail, so you want to be able to edit your data, and that's the form package. So we have quite a nice plethora of form fields to choose from. You have text, passwords, numbers, upload for files, text areas, etc., HTML5 ones. And into a form field, you can also plug in your custom validation code to sort of prevent the user from entering bad data. You can do validation on the entire form or individually on a single field. And of course, that's normally nice, but in the real world we need something better, because fields aren't just one-on-one mappings, so some fields need to be complex multi-field composites, like email, or sorry, like dates, start, end, phone, the number of hours and minutes you worked on a day, stuff like that. That's kind of easy to solve as well. And this is what it looks like when validation fails out of the box. It will highlight the errorness fields for you, and you can ask the form, are you valid or are you not valid? And you can put the validations on the side, or you can summarize it yourself on the bottom. That's all up to you. There's quite a bit of creativity allowed here. And the sister of the grid is the tree. So you can put a single column tree if you want, or you can make it into a full-fledged tree grid on the right-hand side. Also kind of nice, you plug in a tree data store and you get animation. You have checkbox selection models. You can drag those nodes around and restructure the tree. And you also get all the nice stuff that comes from the grid, which means you can drag drop columns all over the place and edit data and whatnot. Once you have your data, you can also visualize it using charts. And this charts package is also very popular. It's interactive, meaning you can click on data points and so on. It's, of course, cross-browser. It uses SVG for good browsers, and for less fortunate browsers, it uses VML. But it still looks very good in both those implementations. And animations, of course. So once your data set changes, it will do nice animations out of the box. So let's just take a quick look at the charts. So I hope this is visible for you. Here we have a grid that I mentioned, so I can pick up a column, put it here if I want. I can click here, select. So all of these widgets are tied to the same data store. So using the selection model, we can notify this table or this column chart to highlight a certain item. I can click over here. The chart also has a selection model. And all these widgets, the form fields, they just interact together. And I can edit here and set 0, and you'll see the data just flows. I don't have to tell all the widgets to refresh themselves. All those wires are already there, so you just have to worry about getting data into the widget, and what happens then, Ext will take care of. So this is kind of nice, and you can sort, of course, and you can tie in menus like you would hide stuff. So quite powerful, and this is basically the reason why I fell in love with the framework 5 or 6 years ago. Powers all this is it's called the XJS Class System, which is something that they invented in XJS version 4. And it gives you a uniform way of dealing with classes and inheritance, which you really need, or you really want it if you come from a more classic C# or Java background. You're used to this kind of stuff. You define classes as strings. You can use mix-ins to mix in behavior into a class, which gives you sort of a multiple inheritance mechanism. You can also use dynamic class loading, like John Wilander talked about yesterday. They have an Ext loader for you that helps you load classes on demand. So this is what you do when you define your classes. You pass in a string, that's the class name. You put in some requires, that's your dependencies. You can plug in additional mix-ins to augment the class, like draggable in this case. And of course, you can put any method, since this is just a JavaScript object literal. So you can put any Boolean or function you want there. And just a sample high-level picture of some arbitrary classes in the system is component, which mixes in observable, so you can observe for events. There's a UI panel class, which uses a layer. And then we have subclass to tab panel and window, which in their turn is draggable and resizable. So this is what it looks like in a real-world use case for Sencha. And dynamic loading is also a very must-have feature in today's world, because applications are so complex, and if you don't have some mechanism, it'll quickly grow out of hand. So why we need it is because the day one of your application start out, your HTML page will most likely look something like this. You include, I don't know, jQuery, some files, and then end it with an app.js, which bootstraps everything, right? Fast forward 5 weeks, and you have 73 includes. You have all kinds of libraries. Nobody knows the order. Nobody knows why it works, or the order that they have to be. If you move one around, it breaks. But why? I don't know. Has anyone else but me seen this? Okay, 2. All right. So this is basically the need, the reason we need something that can tell us what we require, what our dependencies are. So in the Ext class, we just put it in plain text, and then the loader will figure it out. So the class will not be fully defined until we have all its puzzle pieces in place first. And I mentioned the data package. That's what drives all these grids and charts, right? So the data package is also one of the major reasons I like this framework, because it gives you a really easy way to work with loading and writing data. And all the components I've shown, and pretty much all of them in the library, use stores and models. And the nice thing is that the UI components don't really know what they're showing, from where it came, or how it's formatted. They just know that it's data. So there's a nice separation of concern there. So the 4 main classes that you need to know about to be efficient with XJS is data reader and proxy, first of all. So the proxy is responsible for fetching stuff, either typically from Ajax, maybe from a cross-domain using a script tag, or something from your local storage or session storage. The reader is responsible for making something out of that makes sense, so parsing and understanding what is the data actually representing. That's the data reader. And then the higher level ones is the model and the store, where the model encapsulates a database table, like a user table in the database. You have a user model in the client. Pretty straightforward. And a store is essentially a cache of a list, a glorified array, if you will, of those model objects. So the store is what you plug into the combo box or the grid panel or tree. All those are driven by stores. And you can filter those and group and sort and so on, and the UI will immediately refresh. And this is basically a high-level picture of the entire data package in Ext. So you see the main ones in the middle that you interact with the most. Models have fields. You can associate models with other models. You can validate on the model level. The store can be sorted, filtered, grouped, any way you want. And the proxy interacts with the outside world, Ajax, JSON-P, whatever you want. So if you tie all this together, I'll briefly show you what you get. So here's one of the samples that you see in the SDK, where here's the tree panel I mentioned, animation, etc. And you can have separate panels in there. You can do an HTML editor window. You can drag these around, of course. Kind of looks like Windows Vista or something like that. And of course a grid, sort it, etc. You can minimize it, get it away with. And something more complex, like charts that are just reloading. So here's a backing store that auto-generates new dummy data every 100 milliseconds or half a second. And then the store just repaints, thinking it's something important. And it just works, and every component is isolated and reads from the same store, of course. So this is kind of easy to fall in love with such a powerful thing, but there's of course a bit of complexity in writing this, but it shows that it's kind of nice, and things are definitely doable. And they have a little start menu here even. Right. So if we review this sample, we got something that was really powerful, something simulating a desktop interface. All the widgets, the user tree list, the company table, the system status charts, all those are backed by the Ext data store. So if there's data in the store, they will show it. If it changes, it will reflect. We didn't spend any time in this demo inventing any complex CSS layouts or worrying about cross-browser differences. All of that is outsourced to the guys writing the underlying framework, or so to speak. So to understand how these widgets work, we have to know a little bit about the component model, which is really, really nice in Sencha. And the underlying class that is the base of all these widgets is the Ext component. Other popular components, of course, text field, tree panel, grid panel, window, form, whatever. And the key thing here is that you have a managed lifecycle for these components. So there's a constructor method, there's an init component method, there's an onRender hook, afterRender hook, and of course onDestroy hook. So you can know when somebody closed your window, you can deallocate, destroy additional elements or clean up tooltips, or maybe stop a connection to the server that is updating the store or something like that. So you have all these hooks that are available to you through the lifetime of the component. So a typical subclass of a component looks like this. If I want to subclass the form, I can just do ext define, say I want to extend the form panel, give it some initial value of a height, and the init component hook that I mentioned. I can override that. Of course, I have to call the superclass, otherwise I break the chain. And in the init component, I can set up whatever I want to set up. I can add fields to my collection of fields, or, I don't know, add a store. Whatever is the contract of this class, you can do in the init component lifecycle hook. And extending components is very simple. Any component in the Ext library can be extended. So you can add your own custom features or functionality. You have all the benefits of the lifecycle with instantiation and destruction. So you can destroy, create it again, destroy, create it again, no problem. And the Gantt chart that we make at Bryntum extends the tree panel that I already showed you. And it basically looks something like this. This is sort of the heart of our entire business. We define a Gantt chart, we extend the tree panel, and we have a custom task store that has to be loaded. So we say, okay, requires task store. We do our stuff in the init component. We have some method to render all these bars that you see in a typical Gantt chart. And that's pretty much it. Of course, there's tons of code more, but this is the heart. And if you're interested in writing your own custom Ext components, there's a pretty big forum section in the Sencha site for community extensions. They also put a marketplace up there, so you can share your plugins, you can buy or sell your own if you want. It's market.sencha.com. And one more thing I want to mention about the Ext JS library is the layouts. It's really what makes you able to not have to be a wizard in CSS. Because you can position all these widgets that I've shown now in various places in the containers that we have. So component is one very key class of the framework. The other one is container. And the container contract is basically that you can contain other components or even containers. So once you are a container or you subclass container, you can choose from any of these built-in layouts like border layout, absolute. You can divide into columns or HBox, table, cells, rows, card, etc. And you can, of course, build your own layouts as well. You can produce very complex layout structures. You can nest however deeply you want. So I'll just switch to my complex layout example. Let's see if we can make this a little bit smaller. Right, so here's the screen divided. The entire viewport is divided into a north section, a main section with west, center, east, and there's a panel south. So you can collapse these. All this comes out of the box. You can collapse and hide things just like you want. Center panel, you can close this if you want. Here's a east side grid panel, which can have buttons, of course, and it's part of a tab panel, so you can switch here. You can collapse it based on what the user wants. You can save this state, of course, as well. All of that is handled by the component stateful model. So next time the user comes back, it'll just refresh and it'll look exactly the same. So you can basically nest however you want based on what your requirements are. So I was thinking I should probably show something how you build stuff with Ext. And the first day of JFocus, I was kind of feeling a little bit sick. I still have a bit of a cold, so pardon my voice. And I thought maybe let's build a Scrum Board, something simple. And it turned out to be actually quite easy. So just quite easy. So I just want to take you through the hours I spent in bed building this. And it turned out to be very doable. So I created a few subclasses of my own to get this started. So you're all familiar with Scrum, right? You have tasks, not started, in progress, tests, done. So first of all, we need data. We have to show some data in our task board, of course. So I hope this is readable. We subclass the Ext data model. We define what our model looks like. So we have name, state, maybe some comments, who is assigned to this, what does it look like, and so on. And we probably want to prevent somebody dropping from not started into done. That seems like a fishy cheating, right? So I've decided to put some method on the prototype of this class. So this is just pure JavaScript with the Ext JS additions. And I have an index HTML file, which includes the Ext CSS. So since I'm lazy, I'm just including everything right now. Normally, you would probably take away all the parts you don't use. So for this example, you could take away all the charts, for example, or just minimize it. And then I have a Scrum CSS file. I'm including the entire library, Ext all debug, and my app.js. And as you can see, the body is empty because we're not doing anything, no static HTML in this page. So in app.js, I'm configuring the Ext loading mechanism to allow me to load classes on demand. And you have to shout if you can't read this. I can make it a little bit bigger. So I create a data store which uses my model. And it's the task store right here, demo model task. And to avoid having to create the dummy files or set up a database, I'm just using inline JSON. So I'm creating some dummy tasks right here. And for the version 0.1, I decided so that we should start just doing a hello world to see that we can show something on the screen, that just a sanity smoke test, that we're up and running. So I just create new Ext panel, no subclasses, nothing, no magic. Set a width, height, title, put it in the DOM. This is just document.body. And hello world. Let's see if this gives us anything on the screen. So let's refresh it. So this is what we get when we type those 5 lines. We get a panel. We have some content here. Not started, that's the title I put. It's not really fit for production yet. So the next step is, of course, to create our own subclass that subclasses Ext panel and puts some view that visualizes our tasks, right? So let's do this then. So I prepare this since I don't trust the demo gods. And I've created a demo view Scrum column, the same thing with state, with height, of course, state to indicate that this is not started, as we saw here. Scrum text, Scrum state. And as I showed earlier, we extend Ext panel. That's how we know who we are, what we are. I'm choosing some layout. Since we're just going to contain one view in this component, I'm asking Ext to fit it to the available space. Defining some interface for this. I can set state, store. We can ignore the tools for now. And of course, since we're going to visualize something, there has to be a template. So there's a powerful templating system in Ext. And here I'm defining the task body, task tools, so you can have some little action buttons for each task. And the init component hook, where I can set up the contract, or the purpose of this class is all defined here, basically. So we create the templates that we need. We create our view, which is just an Ext view, which is driven by a store. So we plug in the store and feed it some template, which outputs the HTML. I'm not going to go into details here, but yeah, just trust me. And that's basically it. And we, of course, call parent, since otherwise we break the chain of the entire lifecycle. And if there's a change in the underlying data store, we want to update the title, so I'm just doing that up front. And this is for the draggable behavior, so we can drag tasks between, but that's for later. So let's just see what this gives us if we put this on the screen and refresh. So now we got a title saying not started 2 tasks. I'm afraid I'm assigned to both those tasks, which sucks. But it seems to work. It looks horrible, and there's still only 1 column. So seems reasonable to complete this journey. We need, I don't know, 4 columns. Seems like a good next step. So that means we create a panel which contains 4 columns. So if we go a little bit further and get rid of that. So now we got 4 columns. Instead, I created a class which contains 4 columns. Since the panel class is a container, it inherits from container, it can contain other panels. And I'm doing a layout, which is Xbox, Hbox, horizontal box. And each column is flexed to the value of 1, which means they share whatever space is available, they share. So if I do this, they share. And if I don't like that, I can also hard code 100 pixels if I want that. Probably not a good idea, but if you want to have one thing that can never go below 100 pixels, maybe that makes sense. You can also set values like min width and max width and so on. So now it's actually a Scrum panel. I don't know who wants to use this in production right now. It actually does drag and drop. I don't know. No applause. So this is a decent step for progress. So we can add any number of columns we want right now. So maybe we should try to make it look, I don't know, a little bit better. So I'll just include some CSS to save you the tedious watching of me typing all this CSS. Now it looks a little bit better. So we added some styles and some layouts and so on. And now we can do things like assign to other users, plugged in some menu, we have comments, and as you can see, I can drag it to here. I cannot, however, drag it to there, because that's not a valid state transition as I define in my model class, right? So it's kind of easy, and you see the not started count is keeping track of how many tasks I have. And I can also tell the component to minimize or maximize itself. Since this is already supported by Sencha, I don't have to do anything. I just say collapse, expand. And since these panels are defined with flex, they will take whatever space is available, right? So super, super simple. And I can, of course, add tasks if I want that and inline. So nothing really powerful in that sense, but still kind of decent for an hour or 2 of work, I think. And the final part is, of course, when we can prove that this can be taken even further, we can allow multiple views to consume our little data store that we created. It doesn't only have to be the Scrum dashboard. So as you can see here, I'm creating a grid. I'm passing in the same task store that powers my Scrum board, and I give it some columns to tell Ext what should we visualize, what should go in each cell, some height, and some plugins for editing. So I'm adding this to the viewport, which is the overall application container. And then we get a new view of the exact same data. And that was about, I don't know, 7 lines or so. And of course, if I move this, you'll see the data is changed, of course, here, because we're sharing the store. I don't have to tell the grid, by the way, something changed. You might want to refresh yourself. All that's done. The wiring is done. And I can, of course, go here, find unicorns, tell the world. And now it's updated, of course, here, because everything is shared. So we don't have to worry about how the visualization happens, because that's XJS responsibility. We worry about getting the data in place, visualizing it, and then the rest is handled by the library itself. So this is kind of all there is to doing your own component. So this shouldn't take more, I don't know, a few days if you start from scratch, and the whole application itself, I don't know, I think it's around 300 or 400 lines of code, and some CSS, of course. So that's pretty much it. I have one more note about testing, because once you build your complex XJS app, testing does become an issue. If you have 100K lines of JavaScript code, you cannot avoid testing it. You're going to end up in a bad place. So just want to mention some tools. Jasmine is very, very popular in all the JavaScript community. There's Selenium, which might be a little bit tricky since all the IDs and the XPaths that Selenium likes, they're dynamic here, so you can't really trust it. There's Siesta. There's also Phantom JS, which, how many of you have heard of Phantom JS? So that's actually made by a guy who works for Sencha, who makes the XJS framework. And it's a brilliant tool for doing really rapid testing. And it's basically a headless WebKit. It's like 99% WebKit under the hood. So you can use it on your command line and test very, very rapidly and launch it from your IDE. And it's just a beautiful tool. So if you want to learn some more about XJS, by all means come up and ask me after. There's also sencha.com/learn, docs, forum, blog. And if you want to learn more about my stuff, you can come to bryntum.com. And thanks a lot for coming, and thanks for listening. Any questions?
I've played around before with Sencha Touch. The class libraries look very similar to that. Are they the same these days, or is that something they used to be?
No, so Sencha Touch is basically, so the question is, what's the difference between Sencha Touch and Ext? And Sencha Touch is basically the mobile version of Ext. It's a trimmed down, targeting mobiles like iOS and Android and BlackBerry and Windows Phone 8 and so on. So you don't find necessarily all the goodies in Ext, because then it would be Ext all over. And these devices are very low power, low memory, so you have to treat them delicately. So Sencha Touch is a very nice way to build apps instead of having to create one app per app store. So they're not the same. I think probably in a perfect future they will be. So it hasn't happened yet. Anyone else? All right, I'll be here if anyone wants to ask more questions.